Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, but as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And here I am today, still in Studio 1 of the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, getting out a little bit these days as the pandemic recedes, but very pleased to be able to have a conversation with a great musician and thinker and author and all kinds of stuff. Peter McClard in New Jersey. How you doing, Peter?
Hey, doing great, Jeff, and it's just an honor to join you every time we discuss things. It always takes me to somewhere I didn't expect, and it's just a real pleasure to go over stuff with you and see what comes up.
Well, thank you very much, and the feeling is mutual. And I guess we could make the same statement about Michael. We met through Michael doing a Planetary Gig Talk live. Michael, the inspiration for Michael, the teacher in Victor Wooten's books, The Music Lesson and The Spirit of Music, who I had the chance to interview at Wooten Woods a couple years ago, and he is such a smart, brilliant, such a person.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
And I wanted to, we did one conversation before, I think on in vibration of intention, music of the spheres, and not a Brahma.
Oh, nice.
And at the end of that, Michael said, let's do this again. So I said, sure, what topic do you want to talk about? And that's what led me to you. He said, well, morphogenesis, and find Peter McClard. Let's get Peter McClard on.
I'm so glad he did that. That's
yeah, me too.
That's fantastic, because I've loved him ever since meeting him, and I believe in Santa Fe, but I definitely spent some time with him in New York too. I'll just never forget the image of him with his electric cello on a skateboard at a huge indoor rave event that was a multi-venue kind of rave event. Only New York can put on something like this, but he was this wandering cellist with a portable system and everything. And I was playing I was over in the corner with my software that converts images and color into music. And so I was doing really cool stuff over there, and he was supplementing it with what he was doing, and we were kind of jamming together, and it was all part of a big happening. But
whoa,
it was cool.
That's wild. Michael is just, oh yeah, I love him. I really admire him, and I'm thankful to have conversations with him. And part of the topic that we discussed on the last Planetary Gig Talk Live with you, and also with Roy Futureman Wooten, was holistic tonality, which is your thing, and maybe we can get into that a little bit too here.
Yeah, we can, and it'll touch into the various topics, I'm sure.
So, just starting off at the very beginning, I'm always curious, how did music come into your life? Did you have music in your household, your parents musical, older brothers, sisters, all that?
Yeah, no, I love that question, and I think it's always good to reflect on one's own life in that way, and ask that same question of oneself. And as I examined that thought, I realized that somewhere down deep, a seed was planted, and a tree has grown. This tree of music, and I'm not quite sure where the seed was planted, other than it was a fertile ground, and it was watered, and it was taken care of with love, and a household that appreciated and loved music and the arts in general. And music was always around, back. So I was born right at the cusp of the 60s, and that was that strange transition from black and white to color in a certain way.
Yeah.
Sort of like when Dorothy steps out of the house in The Wizard into the land of Oz. Yeah. That's kind of what the 60s were. And being born into that, it became a part of who I was. And so being a child of the 60s, where music just was so explosive and colorful and everywhere. It was, and the technology too was coming along. All of a sudden there was stereo. We went from mono to stereo, from black and white to color. The world just opened up.
So many ways.
You went from alcohol to psychedelics and things like that, that happened too. And so this consciousness was changing too in the greater world. And I had these older siblings who were kind of tuned into the music scene and were interested in buying all the albums. And my brother was an artist, and he is an artist. He's a great artist. And
the Beatles came along right there.
And the Beatles came along, and what a great soundtrack for a childhood. Everything you can imagine, and then culminating for a kid, going to the Yellow Submarine as a young kid. It was all a dream come true. But and the Beatles had a huge influence on me. They made me want to be a musician more than I think anybody, even though I adored so much music at the time. And I had a voracious appetite for music from a very young age. And my mother told me it even stretched into my toddler years, where I would really perk up whenever music would come about on TV or radio or whatever. She could tell that I was really interested in it. So she got me an instrument, or at least got me into lessons in, say, first grade with a viola. I'm not sure why viola, but that's somehow was available or something like that. And that was my introduction to sort of learning to play something. And the fact that it was a stringed instrument probably worked well with me, because I've always enjoyed stringed instruments ever since then. And in fact, my older brother, Michael, also, he bought me a guitar for Christmas when I think I was about 9 or 10.
Nice.
Maybe even 8, but it was this really cool little nylon string guitar, and I remember it had a bumper sticker on the case that said "Peace, brother, peace."
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was nice.
Head of the curve.
Yeah, ahead of the curve, and that was a great little guitar to learn on. And I even had a little band with my neighbor across the street who was taking guitar lessons, and I learned some chords from him. And we had this little trio. I think we were called the Surfer Boys or something like that. I forget what it was, but we were just like these little kids in Denver. And we even played at a fraternity house there at the University of Denver. We played the Unicorn Song. I remember that. Some real simple little farmer's corner chords. But I used to always just really love E minor 7th and A 7th. Those two chords really made me feel good, and they were easy to play, easy on the hands. And so I would just play those.
I love those chords too. And I'm saying that from the perspective of someone who kind of felt music was really made by other people, like the Beatles. And I didn't get grabbed by music quite that early, but I did take some guitar lessons after college. And at some point, I remember just going on those two chords and saying, I love these. These are really cool.
Yeah. No, they're great, and they use a lot of open strings, at least the way I was playing them. And the open strings just have that pure vibrational quality to them. And so I really got into the sound of that. And I guess it was sort of a Dorian sort of thing, which it turns out the Beatles, apparently some musicologists discovered that they favor Dorian mode in a lot of their music. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Interesting. And you did, when we were talking before, you had a story about a stethoscope.
Oh yeah. No, that was see, now that's a different dimension of music that really got me, was the sound of music.
Was that later? That was a little later.
No, it was around the same time. I was over at my brother's house, and he was this very, young hippie artist who had a lot of cool stuff around his house. And one of the things he had was a 12-string guitar. And the other thing maybe because our dad was a doctor or something, he
Mm.
had a stethoscope. Maybe he got it from an extra one my dad might have had at one point, but he had a really nice stethoscope. And, Michael likes actually nice stuff. So he had a really good one. And I was just messing around over in some room in his house, in his place. And I put on the stethoscope and I put it up to the 12 string and I started plucking some of those strings. And oh my God, the tones that I was hearing, it was this rainbow of overtones and the sound of metal and wood and vibration, and it just made me so happy. And I was just in love with sound itself at that point. So between sound and music, those are the things that really just grabbed my heart and my mind at the very young age, and I never turned back.
That's so cool, and it makes me want to go out and get a stethoscope.
I know I need to get one. I need to get one on my. Well, it's sort of like I guess it's an amplifier of sorts. It's a natural amplifier.
Yeah,
And,
but right at the source.
Right at the source,
Yeah.
and just very, and that was another funny thing that happened at the time is I did have a little record player right around the time Magical Mystery Tour came out. And I had this little record player, but this thing was not grounded properly or something, so it would shock me. So I remember putting the needle over, because you had to be pretty good at putting the needle on back then.
Yeah.
And so you'd move the needle over, and I'd get a little shock pretty often. But with Magical Mystery Tour, so it kind of burnt that whole thing into my mind as a cool experience, as an electrifying experience.
That is so amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I'm glad I had that. I'm glad I didn't get electrocuted, of course, but I'm sort of glad I got a little shock out of it. It was shocking music at the time,
Wow, very cool. So then after this sort of amazing,
60s period,
starting off with music, then did you? What instruments did you pursue? Were you in bands? And what is the trajectory that kind of got you?
So the trajectory was just being really fascinated with the production of music and how it was played and what it was kind of made out of. And so I just had this curiosity, and I was always a curious person. And I should say also another figure in my childhood was my cousin Garth, who later became Miles Davis guitarist, and he's a really great guitarist. Garth Weber out in the Bay Area now, and he's got a recording studio out there, and he's just a great guy and a wonderful musician with lots of stories himself. And you can check him online, YouTube, Garth Weber. But I used to go visit him up in Boulder, where he lived on the farm that. We had this family farm from an uncle, great grandpa, whatever, from the homesteaders. And anyway, there's this chunk of land up in Boulder that was set aside as this farm. And they were poor, but they lived in this house. But he started out on drums, and he was a tinker, and he made a little amplifier. He made his own electric guitar, and he was really a neat little inventive kid.
Yeah.
And he had these amazing musicians would come, because they had an old schoolhouse on the farm property, and the old schoolhouse became a place where bands liked to rehearse. And one of the bands that rehearsed there was Tommy Bolin's band called Zephyr or something like that. And Tommy Bolin was just an amazing guitarist. So Garth really, once he saw Tommy Bolin playing guitar, he just decided, I have to play guitar, because he went from drums to guitar. But consequently, he's got killer rhythm too, because he started out.
Yeah.
But he and that in turn became an inspiration for me too. So I started getting interested in electric guitars, and of course, since all the bands and things were playing electrics, and I always kept an acoustic guitar. So acoustic guitar has always been a sort of a primary love of mine, and I always will. But I also love electric guitars, and I love them because, well, there's so many reasons. Because you can bend the strings so much, and you can And you can amplify them to get those tones that I was hearing with the stethoscope, except you can get,
Yeah.
I mean, in a certain way, that's what Jimmy was trying to get too, you know, with his amplifiers and feedback. It's really the same stuff that I was getting with the stethoscope, except just brought out even bigger.
Yeah. So
yeah.
were you were in bands and things, and then, but you kind of, have you been a professional musician, or are you really more in the sound and the production? And I know I'd like you to talk about some of the other things you do, because we're talking about the power of music, and you've tapped into it with the fractals and all this
Oh
stuff
my
in
God.
so
Yeah.
many different ways.
Jefferson, I'm telling you, I mean, we only have so much time, right? So, you know, I will just say that there was a constant learning, as any musician goes through, constant learning right up until I was in my early 20s, when I went down to Santa Fe to go to college there at this philosophy liberal arts school called St. John's College. It's all discussion based, but that was a great school for me because it was a place that you weren't specializing in something. You were just learning about how civilization formed and how the process of thoughts over the centuries evolved. And you're all learning that same stuff together with these other cool people, and including some really neat musicians. So, you know, my most important thing at college was my band, and then schoolwork came second. But the program at St. John's also helped organize my mind. And so my mind, when I started reading the Euclid and seeing how he organized geometry into these propositions and these books, it really helped me all of a sudden see a way to think about music too. And so, because one of the areas I've been blessed with is, and not overly so, but just with enough, is mathematical skills. And so the math skills, they come naturally to me, only up to a certain level. My son has higher math skills than me, but I did, you know, go through calculus in high school, and I love trigonometry because it has waves, and it has circles and waves, and those are really interesting to me. And so my math skills that I developed in high school, when they hit St. John's College, it kind of took it looked back through the historical perspective, and saw how the things they were teaching me in high school were just sort of taught as they were, whereas at St. John's they taught you how they became. And so going back to the roots of mathematics, and then the geometry and how the thinking took place, it just ignited something in my mind that started me theorizing and putting together some ideas. And that's how holistic tonality developed, is through that period there. And right at that time, which was the early 80s, was a time when these little synthesizers were coming out, like Casios, and just little cheap ass little synths, like a one is called a Casio VL tone, but I had that. And what I realized is I could play a scale on that, and then I could record the scale on the device and play it back really fast. And I thought, wow, if I play it back so fast, it almost sounds just like a sound. It's no longer a scale, it's just a sound.
Like a note almost.
It's almost like a note. And so that started me thinking about it, you know, and another thing that happened at that same time is fractals were sort of coming to the fore, with Mandelbrot had written his amazing book on fractals. And I bought that book, and I was so fascinated with fractals, and I was just putting all this stuff together: fractals, music, holograms, all these things. Yeah, it was just coming together, and sound, and I've got to put this stuff all together because I'm really I'm getting inspired.
So that became sort of a driving.
It was
purpose.
A driving thing. Yeah. And I had a great friend at St. John's, Justin Parker, who's a brilliant fellow. And he and I would, in these late night discussions and way into the night, would discuss these things. And he was right there with me with my holistic tonality ideas. At the beginning, we invented these things called super chords and hyperchords and super intervals. You know, like a super interval, for example, is something like, let's say you got a regular interval of a C and a G, which is a fifth, right? Now, normally you would just stack those up vertically, and you would say that, or you play them serially. But we started. Well, I started the idea of, well, what if I played C C C C G C C C, and then play that really fast, a little speck of G inside of the C, and so it's created this whole new sonic chemistry set where you could change what an interval was. It's not just C and G. It's a lot of C with a little G, or it's all half C, half G, and the patterns could change too. And so it started to become a whole new. It's like building molecules of music rather than the traditional view of it. And it became, so then you started experimenting. Well, what happens if I play major scales made out of minor scales, or minor scales made out of major scales, and things like that? And it got crazy. It was like a fractal. So and it really was exploring the fractal nature of music. And then the music theory I was learning, it all fit in, because you read music theory and you learn about how the dominant and the tonic and the subdominant, all these things are built out of the overtone series, which goes back to my stethoscope again there. I'm hearing the overtones. But the overtone series is just something that we all vibe with. And so I just realized that we could make new overtones in new ways. And that was basically the main insight I had. And so holistic tonality does come at composition a different way, from the inside out, sort of, where if you're a composer, you want to compose from the very depths of the sound all the way to the outer structures of the sound. And that became, it's a difficult thing, but I realized, that's for the future. Some of that's for the future. It's not necessarily right now, but that's cool, because you have to have something for future musicians to be inspired by and to aspire to, some difficult new things to compose, so that we can take it to another level. We can't just stay on the same music forever. We have to move on to other levels of music. And so that's what I was trying to do.
Wow, I mean, all these things you're describing, it just makes me think it's so integrated, and it all kind of makes sense. It's tied in together, and in ways that I'm not sure I could ever come up with, but just I like hearing you talk about them.
Yeah.
So, when in doing these podcasts, it's kind of been about the power of music and the Planetary Gig Society.
Yeah.
What is that power, and how can we use that power of music to help make a better world? So, I mean, what is that power? What is understanding that power, or touching, or implementing, or
it's
tapping
so powerful.
into that power? How do you describe that?
That power is so deep, and I mean that from the very center of my being. But I think of, first of all, we know that vibration is everywhere, right? It's in the atoms, it's in the light, it's in the air, in the sounds, it's in the water. We see the ponds, ripples, and the gravity waves. Vibrations are everywhere.
Yeah.
And we know this, and those vibrations all have these relationships to each other, and they have their intervals, and they have their octaves, and they have their musical intervals, and dissonance and consonance, and all that stuff is in all the vibrations. And we feel it in our relationships, whether they're consonant or dissonant. You see it in ugly colors that are next to each other that are clashing or dissonant, and then sometimes there's a harmonious palette, and so we have all these language constructs that are very musical. And we say chromatic music, which is light colored music, in colored music, chromatic. Okay, let's do the chromatic scale. Isn't that color? Yeah, that's color.
Yeah, well, they line up.
They line up.
There's that Indian concept of nad, the underlying reality of being sound, vibration, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, the more I learn about this, as I've learned so much just in the last few years. So how do we tap into that? I mean, you're doing it. A lot of people are doing it, but what are we doing?
Well, okay. So, I mean, getting back to sound and music, I'm thinking that, like our primary sense is touch. Touch is that's the first thing that babies develop, is the sense of touch. And if you think about it, your ears are a sense of touch for sound or for vibration. And so the air, it's taking touch down to that next level of vibration.
Yeah.
And it's going right into your head, right into your brain, right into your mind. And so that primal sense of touch is now being picked up as vibration. And the ears are amazing. That's a whole separate podcast on the ears, because they give you balance and motion sensing and all that stuff right there in your ears, which is really incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But they're these wonderful organs of sensing touch, of vibration. And so that's why music is so powerful, is because it goes into the most primal part of our being, and it's the most direct touch of our mind and our spirit. It's just right. It's so amazing that the air can vibrate in these beautiful ways, or intense ways, whatever it is, because music has so many purposes too. And you see it used in so many ways, Jefferson. You know what I mean? It's like how many different, you have soundtracks, you have game music and movie music and advertising music, and then you have artistic music, and you've got this sort of sublime kind of high-minded classical artistic music, and then you got sort of abstract music, that's used to sort of shock people, and then you've got music that's used to scare people and then intimidate them, and then other types of music is to relax and chill you and heal you. And so this music has every purpose under the sun. So in a certain way, the power of music is also like the power of many things, where it can be used for negative things or positive things. So if you talk about the positive power of music, that's something to concentrate, but you have to also understand the negative power of music. And that is, noise pollution, or overusing music and cheapifying music by using it everywhere on everything. And we're bombarded by it. And it creates a type of insanity, really, in our society. Too much. I mean, as much as I love music, I don't want to ruin it by overdoing it.
Yeah, and noise pollution, that's a big topic. I've been thinking about that a lot. I'm trying to make a little stage, the Nama stage, out in the backyard at our house, and it's all set up. But we live right by a road where the cars go by, and the guys who have motorcycles love to, show everybody how loud they are.
Oh, they're the loudest.
plus planes. Hey,
I know, right?
I'm not sure we realize how much of an impact a lot of the noise pollution really has.
Absolutely, Jefferson. I couldn't agree more. And I think noise pollution is a huge problem in our world. And so in a lot of ways, when you talk about how can we use music to heal and help, we have to find ways to make it not hurt us. And when I say music, I kind of do mean sound in a lot of ways. And that's part of holistic tonality. We can get into that more, but I sort of view all sound in this sort of a musical way, or all music in a sound kind of way, I'll say that, or through that lens of sound. And it just happens to be, as you analyze music, it really boils down to a sound. Even if you're listening to a symphony, you're still hearing a sound. If you hear a guitar plucked or a harp, you're hearing a sound. No matter what it is, it's a sound. And, people bang on pots and pans and make great music. And so, it does. But getting back to the pollution bit, you have airplanes, cars, and ambient noise that's everywhere, air conditioners and things like that. Yep. And it just creates a sort of...
Yeah, it's stressful.
It's stressful, and it freaks you out if you go out to, like, when I go back to New Mexico after being in New Jersey and New York for a bit, And then it's quiet at night. You can almost hear your heartbeat. That's a little scary at first. It takes a while to get used to that, where it's
Yeah, well,
peaceful.
that certainly is something I think we could focus on a little bit more. But where do you see kind of, I don't know, how can we tap into music in the future? Or how can we use it to, I don't know, is this just too idealistic or something? How can we make a better world using music? It seems like a pretty good tool or path or
It's a
something.
great tool. It's a great tool, and I think it has to be elevated. In order to do that, you have to elevate music. You can't just. I don't think a single. I mean, I do think that certain artists rise up and create a consciousness shift. Say like the Beatles. And like Jimmy and Motown, really whole movements of music create a consciousness shift, and sometimes that consciousness can shift towards a more enlightened thing, and it can go the other way. It can devolve a little bit, depending on if it's very materialistic kind of music and it's just sort of churned out by big business, and it's not it's not about the artistry anymore. It's about the money. That's the sort of the darker side of it, where music can be more harmful because it's not looking out for our best interest. But if we teach about the beauty of music at a young age and get people engaged with music at a young age, which means you got to keep it in our schools, which is also seems to be a constant struggle now.
Yeah.
Because we're so geared towards producing, workers and whatever it is they're trying to churn out in our education system. I've heard it. So one way is that we're trying to create more teachers for our education system so that we can create more teachers for our education. But I don't know. I think it starts with the children, and you need some musical ambassadors. You need these wonderful people like Roy and Victor and yourself that are ambassadors for music, that are putting it out there as a solution, as a thing to be revered and worked with towards a positive goal. I think that mindfulness of society has to come around one brick at a time, and generally starting with young people. But part of it really does require kind of quieting the noise a little bit, so music can come out and say its thing, and it's in a beautiful way. Otherwise, it can get lost, and it just becomes lost in a sea of noise, and the actual beauty is missed. And it's sort of like if you go out to stare at the stars at night and you got light pollution and you look up and all you can see is Venus, and there's a whole Milky Way behind that you're not seeing.
Can't even see. Yeah. We're not aware of. Well, that's a good point too. And it does touch a little bit on what we talked about in our other session with Michael and Roy, and Patty Rain, who joined the morphic resonance. And, it strikes me not a bad goal to just try to uplift music and think about it and think about the power and extol the power and just try to get other people to think about music in a different way, maybe, or just focus on it. And it's like those 100 monkeys, the example of the 100 monkeys who start cleaning the bananas one way on one island, and then some monkeys on another island who they never talked with or anything start doing the same thing.
Yes.
It's kind of pretty profound, and also ties in with what you're talking about, the holistic nature of music and sound.
Absolutely. No, and I agree. And when you throw in morphic resonance, that Rupert Sheldrake thought and theory, you start to, that creates musical connections on a whole different level. That's you could almost call it psychic.
Yeah.
And that can permeate society in ways that are beyond our understanding almost, and but have been shown to be real. I mean, his experiments, you can go read up on this brilliant philosopher, and his studies are very concrete, and he proved that morphic resonance was something out there that connected us in ways.
It's really profound. I went down a lot of rabbit holes on YouTube with Rupert Sheldrake. Um, well, I mean, we could, I think, talk forever, but one thing I wanted to ask about is I know you have a lot of things that you do, like you have some apps and your fractal
Yeah,
thing, and people
yeah.
can. Is your website like? Is it Peter McClard?
Well, no, that's my personal sort of like little CV, if you will. But yeah. So part of in all of this uh, experimentation and messing around, and with my math and everything, and I learned programming. I started programming in high school, and in college, St. John's wasn't a programming type of school, but I kept a little computer there, and I kept my chops up a little bit. And then, but when I moved to New York, I actually ended up starting a software business, and that software business made music software in the beginning, music and art software, graphic software, and it was really fun, wonderful stuff. I got a patent on something called Pick Sound I was telling you about before that converted RGB into do re mi basically, in a cool way. And I had this other program I wrote, which was sort of like one of my tour de force programs that I made in my life, which is called Hypercord. And that one was featured in the Computer Music Journal, which is an MIT publication. And that was a very intense piece of software that was exploring the ideas of holistic tonality in a concrete way. And of lately, of course, apps are the thing, but it's not easy to make a living with music apps just as an individual, so I just do it for the love of it. And so you can get Pick Sound on the App Store. You can get
Pixound.
Pixound.
It's on his shirt, everybody.
Yeah, I got my shirt on right now, a matter of fact. And Different Drummer is another really, I hope that you and I can have a video webcast at some point of my Different Drummer. I want to show you that because that is going to tie in a lot of the ideas about vibration and rhythm and music in general, with waveforms and things like that in a really interesting way.
Wow. Very cool. So, all you music, science, whatever, technology geeks, you should check out Peter McClard. What's the best place for them to?
You could go to technemedia.com, TECHNE media.com. And so that's the Greek word for art, techne. So art media, but it's technemedia.com. And that has a listing of my software. It's not the most up-to-date website, but it's fairly good at getting you to the stuff that I've made. And it's fun stuff. And I have more stuff on the way. It's just now it takes longer to produce it because I'm so busy with everything. And I do have a band now, and I'm having fun with that. And, my life is very full, and I think everybody, pretty much has a full life. But, mine is filled with stuff that I enjoy. And I love music. Just continues to blow my mind all the time because it's just got more. And I just meeting someone like Roy, and then discovering all of the stuff he's done, and Victor and those guys, you can go on and on discovering great things out there in music. And that's part of what we need to do is share the good stuff, because we need to reduce the noise. It's just like in a mix, you got to bring down some of the things so you can bring out the good stuff. So it's not just about music, it's about also silence and peace. You got to bring peace, and then you let the music be the joy that comes in, the light that comes in to fill that silence, and then it becomes powerful.
Yeah. Well, we'll just keep working on it. I know you will, and I'll do my part, and I'm looking forward to the next opportunity to work together on something, or when we'll be in touch about all these things.
I sure hope so. I want people to really embrace good music and promote good music, and support artists and support musicians. That's also important too, is when you hear a good artist, and you try to support that artist as much as you can.
Yeah.
And that's another way we can all help, is to support those acupuncture points of music, the musical ambassadors such as yourself, and hit those acupuncture needles in the right place, and things can start moving.
Yeah, and yours as well. So, all
Thank
right,
you.
I'm just going to say thank you very much, Peter McClard. Really appreciate it, and look forward to our next adventure.
Absolutely, Jefferson. You're a great guy, and I'm honored to do this, and I love you and your listeners. So I wish you all well.
Thanks, appreciate it, Peter McClard, everybody. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.